Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Good evening and welcome to Santa Monica KTC's weekly gathering. This evening, we're pleased to have Lama Adam continue his series entitled On the Wings of Wisdom and Compassion. Before we turn things over to Lama Adam, I have a few special announcements to make. Santa Monica KTC has been spreading the Dharma for over 2 decades, but we are now Santa Monica. Well, let me read this. So, for over 2 decades, we've been sponsoring Lama visits, hosting weekly Lama Zoom teachings, sponsoring programs. Sorry, everybody. Sponsoring programs and sending weekly newsletters. Our goal is to inform and educate about the Karma Kaji lineage of Vajrayana Buddhism and Buddha Dharma in general. We have been able to grow our Sangha the last few years, despite the unfortunate events of the pandemic. We are now able to reach so many more of you from all over due to the good karmic connection of Zoom. We are so excited to announce our name change to Karma Thegsum Chöling, Southern California. Please visit us at our new website address, ktcsocal.org, ktcsocal.org. Please visit our website and see the changes we have made. You are also able to make donations directly to our teachers, as well as see the different levels of memberships we have. We will also encourage everybody to check out our membership page specifically and to become a member of ktcsocal.org or KTC SoCal. Additionally, on May 2nd, we are happy to announce that Lama Lodro, president of Karma Triana Dharma Chakra, main seat of the Karma Kaji lineage in North America, will officially bless and launch our new name and website. She will also offer a teaching of Nundro. We will have some special appearances that night as well, so we look forward to seeing you all there. And now I'll hand it over to you, Lama Adam. Thank you for being with us here tonight.
Thank you. I pray that this name change brings about a lot of auspiciousness and new connections and expansion and flourishing. It's amazing how far you've come, and I think this is a great new chapter. So happy to be here at the announcement. And let's begin tonight with the 4-line refuge prayer. I'll share a screen for that. And after that, we'll do a short period of meditation. Tonight, we're going to be jumping into the second part of the preliminaries from Lojong, which is the 4 thoughts. And I know you recently had Kepo 10 teach on the 4 thoughts too. Tonight will be a little more in depth and hopefully a little bit more interactive. I really want to get into kind of like live contemplation so that we can kind of work on that all together. And I've got some resources to help with that as well. But for that reason, we'll sit, but it's going to be relatively brief. So I will share screen. So we will chant once in English, once in Tibetan, and once in English. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. O Sangye Chudang Soki Chodnama Jangchu Padu Dagni Kyapsuji Daki Jin Soki Pe Sunam Ki Drola Penchi Sangye Drupasho. I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of accomplishing generosity and the other perfections, may I attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. Now I'll say a short prayer of my own. O Gaden Sawelama Rinpoche Daki Jiwa Bedeten Jula Adun jumbo go neje zunde. Kusun tuking drup sadu so. Okay, thank you. Now we will sit for a little bit. I would just say before we begin, take a posture straight back, an open heart, and let's take a little short 3-step process of intention setting here. And let's think for a minute. Let's review why we're here tonight, what our intention is. Both what we ultimately want to accomplish and how we think that this will support us in that goal. And recognizing that our being here tonight and bringing ourselves in presence and loving kindness, recognizing that that does get us closer to our ultimate goal. We make a resolution to continue to make choices that will support that goal. And with that in mind, let's do a couple minutes of quiet shamatha. Now I'd invite you to let go of any technique and just see if you can observe the flow of your thoughts and sensations. Just watch the river of experience flow past. You may move from one thought to a sensation, to a memory. Try to just let yourself move with each thing as it arises without getting caught. And then whatever you used as your anchor for the meditation, whether it was your breath or a visualization, see if you can just plop that anchor right into the middle of this river. The water keeps flowing, but the anchor keeps us tethered. And then as we begin to transition, move your fingers and toes a little bit and take a look around the room you're in. Okay, thank you. Last time we talked a good bit about the meaning of Dharma, and I remember I started talking about turning the little D's into the big D's, turning the big D Dharma being the Buddha's teaching, like trying to take all the little D Dharmas, like washing clothes and walking around, and try to make those into the big D Dharmas, and that's how kind of what our applied practice is. Our formal practice in many ways is the big D Dharma, Sadharma in Sanskrit, but this idea of like the formal practice. Um, and then these little D Dharmas, what I mean is just all the other stuff we're doing. And can we make those into practice too? Can we bring to those practices our innate wisdom and compassion and allow that, the formal practice to reveal those? But then when we move into our day, can we just as often as we can try to bring those things to bear and trust that they're there for us and that we can do that? Um, that distinction of formal and applied practice, I think, is particularly relevant to the topic of Lojong that we're covering here. Um, the other thing I think that's really important, particularly tonight, and in talking about the four thoughts, is karma. And karma in Sanskrit just means action. The difference, I think, in translations or meaning being that it's actually closer to not just doing a thing, but the thing that will inevitably result from the thing that has been done. So there's a bit of forethought built in to this idea of karma. There's an understanding that in a moment we are doing a thing, but that thing will lead to something. And similarly, whatever we're experiencing is the result of something that happened before. And in a way, we're kind of on this pin, that stands right at the intersection of cause and result. And each moment is both the result and the cause. And it's really a profound way of thinking about things. And karma is not an ethical or a moral judgment. And what I mean by that, it's not really about good or bad or right or wrong. We might say that, but it's only about good or bad or right or wrong insofar as we label what brings us lasting happiness and other beings lasting happiness as good or right. And what brings about suffering, we label that bad or wrong. So it's not so much that we're making some sort of ethical judgment as it is that we test the Buddha's teaching, and we see that when we act with wisdom of the true nature of things and with compassion towards ourselves and others, then that leads to happiness. And when we don't do that, it results in suffering. And so we're kind of reframing good and bad or right and wrong from what we might normally think. I might say I had a great night when I was barely present at all. I was just doing something that I really like doing, but kind of was lost in distraction or self cherishing, But that doesn't actually mean it's a good night from the Dharma standpoint. So I think it's important to note with karma, it's really kind of just about that distinction. Like, are we creating the causes of happiness or the causes of suffering? And karma relates a lot to habits and habit energy, and habits start with the mind. They sometimes often extend out to actions of speech and body as well. But karma, this action, is also a mental process, things we think we're likely to think again. So karma is something that deserves a lot of attention. It is the mechanism of relative truth. It is how relative truth works. It's karma. That's how this all works. And a primary importance of mindfulness is to have a means to shift our karma, particularly shifting it towards causes of happiness and away from the causes of suffering. So again, karma means action, but this happens in our mind too. And what does our mind usually do if we're not really paying attention or working with it? What does it do just when it's left to its own devices? That's the reason the first thing we learn in meditation is shamatha, because that cultivates mindfulness and its companion awareness. When we start meditating and when we continue meditating, inevitably we see habits, we see karma arising. I can say for myself, and I think there's probably other people that have had this experience, that my fixation on perfection or doing it right comes up a lot, and that's something I have to work with. This idea that, we're in a realm where there really isn't a perfect, there's just a process. There is a perfect at enlightenment, but day to day, I'm going to have a lot of thoughts come up. I'm going to get distracted. I'm going to get sleepy. And I have to not make it into a cause of attachment in the moment, thinking like I'm not a good meditator or I'm not doing this right. In the moment, I just need to apply the technique. And if it's shamatha, it's placing attention. And when we get distracted, bringing the mind back. So one of the main reasons we start with mindfulness is because it helps us to see the patterns we have. And so what we're really trying to do is shift karma from ignorance to wisdom, and shift the karma of selfishness and aggression to the karma of compassion. So with that in mind, I just want to ask first, if last time we covered Guru Yoga, so I just want to see if there are any questions on that practice before we move on. Guru Yoga as taught in Great Path of Awakening. When we visualize the Guru above our heads, we supplicate, Guru descends into our heart. I know last time I mentioned I would share a story about supplication and that word. I might have told this story before, but prayer and supplication really didn't click for me until the POA retreat with Khenpo Carter Rinpoche in 2014. And that's when we would go, it was the first time he taught POA publicly, ejection of consciousness, at the time of death. And so it was a big deal. A lot of people wanted to go. And it was the first time I'd ever signed up for a teaching. They announced it, I think, a year in advance. And you were required to do some stuff to be able to go. And the main thing you were required to do was 600,000 repetitions of the Amitabha mantra. So I will actually, this just came to mind. I actually did something I probably shouldn't have done. I kind of took a break from my Nundro to do that and just kind of did Amitabha for the year. It was I don't regret it per se, but I know I was probably in a state of mind where I was like, well, now I can just do this thing instead. I did kind of in a way take a preference route, but I'm glad I did, and I did a whole year of doing Amitabha then, and collected all my recitations. So for a whole, I think 10 months, I think it was in October, of doing Amitabha every day and getting a lot of repetitions on that mantra and the visualization and everything. And then we go for the retreat, and the retreat was teaching every day, and then the last 3 days, if you know POA, there is a test to see your accomplishment in the practice, and it's a pretty amazing test. It's they take a piece of dry kusha grass and they stick it in the top of your head. The idea is that they've stuck it into the place you've prepared through your practice of POA for the ejection of consciousness. And first of all, it's kind of amazing that can happen, that can work. You just stick a piece of grass in your head all of a sudden. But I'll tell you too that like during that week, I was feeling something. I mean, the thing I remember vividly is like it felt like if you took the top of a 2-liter bottle, the bottle top, and you just pushed it on the top of your head and held it there for a minute and then picked it up. It kind of felt like that, about halfway through the week and on. And I was there with my partner, and it felt oily too. Like there was like oil. It was like definitely noticeably oilier in that spot. And sometimes people show signs of even like extruding some blood and lymph out of the top of their head. So there are some very kind of amazing and visible signs when you do this practice. But the kusha grass, like, so the last 3 days, they invited people to come up, and they had a little handful of kusha grass. And I think there were 3 of them, Lama Tendup and Lama Tashi and Khenpo Carter Rinpoche, and they were all like, everybody who came up, they would try to put the grass in. And that first day, I was like, I got this, right? Like, it feels a little oily here. Like, I'm going to do it. So I may have been the first person up there. I was one of the first ones, right? And they went to put the grass in, and it wouldn't go. It wouldn't go. And I was like, all right, well, 2 more days. And went and sat down, did all my practice again the next day. They invited people to come up. I was sure it was going to work. It didn't go in. I'm seeing other people walking around with grass sticking out of their head, and and starting to get like a little like, something wrong with me. Am I not doing this right? Like, and after that second day, it's like there's only one more day, and that next day, like I was thinking, like I can't go home without this working. Like I've gotta. There's something I'm not doing right, and part of that practice is supplications, and like I really wanted to accomplish something with that practice because it's like one of the most meaningful practices you can do, especially at the time of death, and you can help other people with that practice. And so that last day when we were doing the supplications, that's when it hit me, because I was really supplicating in that moment, like, please let me accomplish this, please. And so I always think about that and remember that, because it's pretty easy when we say prayers day after day after day to just kind of say them. But I think it's good to be able to bring to mind really what it means to supplicate, and really to beg for help from the lineage and the lineage masters and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to help you to accomplish the benefit of beings. So I would just say when you do this guru yoga, try to get that sort of an attitude around the supplication.
Adam, I have
Um,
a question.
yeah,
Yeah, so when when your teacher has passed away, like some of us, Kempo Kartar was our teacher. Any advice on making sure you still have that connection? Like you don't think, well, he's gone and my teacher's gone, and what do you say to students?
yeah. I mean, I think Guru Yoga is one of the best. I mean, I think this very practice is a fantastic way. I
Oh,
mean, and that's when you hear myself and other teachers say a little prayer after refuge. That's what we're doing. That's a Guru
oh,
Yoga
okay.
prayer. So in that moment, I'm visualizing Vajradhara above my head, and he's inseparable from Rinpoche and Karmapa and
Yeah.
all enlightened beings, and then coming to rest in my heart. So
Cool.
that's one prong. The other prong is like I talked to Rinpoche a lot more than I used to, I think, when he was here. Like, and I kind of feel like, not to get all pop culture about it, but like when Obi-Wan died, like Obi-Wan was everywhere, right? Like, and that's not any different when Kevin Carter Rinpoche was alive, but I think to me, I kind of realized when he was gone that like now I can talk to him anytime. I mean, I could have before too, but it didn't really hit me till afterwards. And I forget sometimes, but it's always nice when I remember like, oh, I can not only just like talk to him, but like supplicate, ask for help and ask for, guidance. And I'm not going to say like Rinpoche talks to me or something, but like I feel like there is some guidance that comes when we ask. And I think that kind of, if you can cultivate that kind of a relationship, um, I think you'll notice it. And I think you'll notice like what it does. You know what I mean? Like I think it's a really special kind of practice to do the guru yoga, but then also, just in general, be able to supplicate and pray. And I mean, even outside the context, I mean, in a way, we're doing, not just in a way, we're explicitly doing this in all the sadhanas we're doing, but I think for sometimes we just need to do it in a very homespun kind of way and just connect and talk and ask and, seek care and guidance. And that would be my suggestion.
Great.
I have
Does
another
that help?
question.
Yeah.
So at the end of this retreat, where everybody's walking around with grass sticking out of their head, did they take that
Yes.
out before they released you from the retreat, or did people leave with grass sticking out of their head?
That's a good question. I think that it kind of falls out because the third day, I don't think I said this, but it did work the third day for me. And actually, I think everybody, it worked the third day. And I have a feeling, just knowing me, I probably would have tried to leave it in there as long as I could. So I think it probably just fell out. I doubt it stayed longer than a day, or that day. But I know people were walking around with it. I remember there were people just kind of walking around with grass sticking out of their head.
Now, were they shaved heads, or they could have stuck it in their hair so that held it up?
Maybe, yeah. There were, you know how it is at KTD, a fair amount of shaved heads, but a fair amount of hair too.
I,
Good mix.
I never heard of anything like that. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got a lot of my, you know, I want to say like faith, but I mean like really more like I got a lot more confidence in the mystery of what we practice um, that day, because of those signs, like physical signs. Like that was pretty amazing. So yeah, it's one of those things where like there are miraculous things that happened, and it is helpful to see it. I hope like me recounting it is also helpful, but I hope you see some of those things too.
Well, Lama Adam, Max and I were there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I remember it.
2014.
Well,
Yeah,
I did it
there were
twice.
two.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
both. Max did one with me, and then I did another. And yeah, I mean, some people left the grass in their head for a little bit, but it was mostly just, yeah, it's standing on its own. And then a lot of people just took it out. set the grass down on the ground, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a magical weekend though.
Yeah.
I'm going to share screen here again. I want to talk briefly about a method of contemplation. So for the Lojong practice as it's prescribed in Great Path of Awakening, we start with the Guru Yoga, and then we move to the 4 thoughts. And we may spend 2 sessions on this because I think the 4 thoughts are such a rich thing to contemplate. So the first thing I really want to introduce is this 3-step method of contemplation. I believe this is Taisitu Rinpoche's method. And so the first step, like, so for instance, if we start with the first of the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, and that 4 thoughts that turn the mind so really, again, this is why I brought up karma in the beginning. You know, there's shifting this karma towards the big D dharmas as opposed to the little d dharmas. You know, we're shifting towards the mind that is aware of and utilizes its wisdom and compassion. So we start with the review. So if we're starting with precious human birth, the review would be thinking about what makes this human birth precious. And in fact, questioning it. Like, I might start with, like, I don't know that this is a precious human birth, you know? Let me think about it for a minute here. Like, I'm having a hard day. I usually have bananas, and there wasn't a banana here this morning, and that was tough, you know? And then I think, oh, but wait a minute, there's a lot of people who don't have any food, you know, and I've got plenty of food in the kitchen. It's just not my favorite food. And, you know, and I'm about to go in and sit down and practice, you know, Karma Kagyu Vajrayana practices that I learned from a teacher, you know, that's fully trained and a realized being, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. Like, wow, like that. Think of all the people in the world. There's not a lot of people that have that precious experience, that information and the training and the ability to sit and do it in calm and without being in fear of my life and without being gripped by hunger. This is really, really precious. Okay, and so what I just got to there is the second step, which is recognize. So the second step is I got to that recognition, like, oh, this is a precious human birth. So that's step 2. So this method of contemplation is review until you recognize. And that is something that as you practice contemplative meditation, you start to kind of know what that feeling is when things shift. Like, oh, yeah, okay, this is really true. Like, you kind of click into, like, the truth of the situation because of your review. And then once you've done that, the third step is to ruminate. Nope, not to ruminate. That's the pitfall we want to watch out for. That third step is to resolve. And the main thing to watch out for is just not to turn this into a rumination. So, for instance, one of the 4 thoughts here is impermanence. You know, so we could review that until we realize, like, wow, everything really is impermanent. And I don't know how long I have. And no matter what, I'm rocketing towards my own death here every day. I read the other day that Trungpa Rinpoche started a talk with some of you will die soon, some a little later. That's like, I love that. So it's totally true, you know? So knowing that, remembering that, could then lead into some depression or rumination. Or I was thinking today, it's almost kind of like the 4 of the 5 stages of grief that you don't want to be in, right? Like, I think in the stages of grief, you're trying to get to acceptance. But I think a lot of times, once we hit that recognition stage, it could be anger, it could be depression, it could be bargaining, it could be denial. And we may talk in our heads, you know, the contemplation could turn into, like, a whole dialogue about the denial of it then, or the anger about it or something. But the idea is, once we recognize it, we accept it as true, and we resolve to act because it's true. So we resolve to continue to practice Dharma, to do our practice. So that's really the 3-step method that keeps a contemplation productive and maximizes the benefit of what we're doing. And it can differ in time, the amount of time that we're doing these things. Like it may be that we review something for just a minute and it really clicks, and then we recognize, and then we resolve. But we might need to review for a little while sometimes to get to a real recognition. But in any case, when we recognize, then we resolve. Like recognize is the catapult into resolve. So there's really not a lot to do hanging out on the recognized level. We go right to making a resolution, which could be like the aspirations that we make. I make the aspiration that I continue to be awake in as many moments as possible, and as loving and as kind to everybody that I meet, to notice when my habits of selfishness arise, and instead, with a little bit of an attitude of sense of humor and gentleness, to turn those thoughts towards loving kindness and compassion for others. So that resolve is really like the next big step, and then we can start a new cycle with a new contemplation. But this is a really effective way of contemplating these things. I want to go into some specific examples, but does anyone have any questions about just that segment? So I'm going to put something up on the screen here. I might be able to put it in the chat too. There's something I'd like you to download. I gave you a QR code if you want to do it on your phone, if it's easier. If you can look at this while we're talking, that would be best.
Adam,
But this will take.
I just have to mention one thing. You said in step 3, resolve, not ruminate.
Yes.
And it kind of reminds me of what I heard once at a teaching about it's okay to feel guilty about something that you've done, but the guilt should be taken immediate action from it, and don't stay in the guilt.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, totally true. Yeah, I mean, and that's, I think, like when we talk about remorse or shame, that like I think there's a lot of I wish I knew a little bit more about the translation. Charles, you may know this. A lot of times like shame will be in some of these translations, usually older translations. And I kind of wonder if that's actually our shame, or is it like a lot of like Tibetan words, is it closer to another meaning? Do you know anything about that?
Well, the two translations of one is moral shame, and the other, that is that feeling of remorse that we have when we've done something. And then there's moral dread. Moral dread is actually realizing the effect of our negative actions to really stop it and not do that anymore. Moral dread is an actually positive force that prevents us from making harmful actions.
Wow, that's neat. It kind of I was gonna say it sounds like that, because shame sounds like somewhere you get stuck, but dread sounds like it has kind of action baked in.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I've heard, there's a lot of debate, amongst Westerners, that's too negative of a concept, but I've always tried to describe it as very positive.
Yeah.
That there are actually wholesome states. And I think that Daniel hit on it, that it's you realize the negative action that you've done and then move ahead to the resolution not to do it. That's such a positive, to realize the harm and then just make the resolution.
Yeah.
I'll share one story. Back in the 80s when I was beginning Nundro, and sometimes I would go into the four thoughts and I'd spend an hour and a half trying, which is not the point. It's way overboard because I didn't leave any time to do the prostrations. And that was ruminating. And I just realized now with your description, don't ruminate. So you can go overboard. But
Yeah.
in the end, I guess. But we go through these learning lessons. Like today, Jody.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, that's great. And this thread runs through because I mean we haven't in this teaching we haven't gotten to tong-len yet, but that's a big pitfall in tong-len too. Like that can be an easy place to start to ruminate. So what I've linked to here is a document I put together that I called the Four Thoughts Contemplation Companion. And I've got little excerpts of it here that I can put on the screen as well. But this is directly, maybe not directly, but this is paraphrased from Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So this is Gampopa's kind of like bullet point run through of the four thoughts. And the reason I wanted to give this to you and that I give this to people when I teach the four thoughts is because it really gives you a lot to dig into with each of these thoughts. And it gives you a different thing to work with every day or multiple contemplations to work with in one session. But it really goes into detail. So for instance, and we'll probably just do this one today, but for instance, this precious human birth. You'll see this section is divided into the 8 freedoms and the 10 resources. So when we sit down to do this contemplation, you could go 1 through 8. You could just do 1 and 2 on a certain day, however you want to do it. I mean, Charles is right. Like the four thoughts are to generate this natural, organic motivation to practice. So this is like on the way to the practice that we do the four thoughts. But the four thoughts can also, like any practice, be done as applied practice too. And that's another thing I want us to talk about is how do we integrate the four thoughts into applied practice. But just getting into the bare bones, like contemplating the four thoughts, like if we look at just this first section where the 8 freedoms are listed, these are the things because of our precious human birth that we are free of. And if we start simply with hell beings experience heat and cold without the slightest break, that's something we need to just kind of review. Like, think about that for a moment. And I want to make I want to mention too, this is, I wanted to keep this to Gampopa's exposition of these, but I when I come to these too, will often think also about the emotional causes of birth in these realms. So for instance, hell beings experience heat and cold without the slightest break. I might also think like beings who are immersed in anger, see the world as a threat, everywhere they go, things like that. So there are with each of these realms, these references to these realms, we can also think of what's described as the cause of birth in those realms. So hell realms, anger; hungry ghost realm, like a poverty mentality, jealousy; animals or ignorance. It doesn't go through literally each 6. Some of them, the long-lived gods covers both the demigods and the god realm. But in any case, like each one of these can be their own contemplation. So what Lama Kathy always teaches that I love and would recommend is to take a week with each one of these. So kind of have this precious human birth week where you're just doing the precious human birth contemplations. And as you move through the world, during the day, you're thinking about this precious human birth and contemplating that with all the people you meet and all the challenges you have and all the privileges that you have and all of those things, and really kind of inhabit for the week that thought that turns the mind. And it doesn't have to be a week. It could be 10 days, could be a month, it could be 3 days. But I think the idea is really to just take some time to dive in to each one of these. And with a resource like this, you really can do that. I mean, we have the 8 freedoms and then we have the 10 resources. So just to dive in here for the 8 freedoms, we have hell beings. We have the hungry ghosts are tormented solely by the sufferings of hunger and thirst. And like part of this, so for instance, if I'm contemplating hungry ghosts are tormented by the sufferings of hunger and thirst, I'm thinking about like what it would be like we only can really compare to our relative experience, right? So I'm thinking about me sort of, but I'm thinking, what would it be like if I didn't know where my next meal was? How does that affect my life? And how does it affect my life? Not only if I don't know where my next meal is, but I don't know if I can have a next meal. Like I really don't know where it's going to be, and I'm probably pretty focused on my next meal, but I don't know where tomorrow's meals are going to be either. And if you're a hungry ghost, like you've probably had some experience with the fact that when you drink that water, it's turns out to be razor blades. So there's that aspect of it too. So I'm really connecting with this idea of like wanting and needing and feeling like even when I get, it's not enough or it's not what I was looking for. And recognizing that as the little challenges I have in my life still don't take away the fact that this is a precious human birth. It's not just precious because I'm human. I mean, that's part of what we're contemplating here. It's also precious because of the circumstances of having met with the Dharma and qualified teachers and a living lineage, and all of the amazing things that make it possible not just to be happy right now, but to have access to the teachings that bring about the causes of happiness later, and a true path to awakening. So we also have animals are dull and ignorant, do not understand or know anything. It's interesting because when I think of animals, I often also think of fear, because when you don't know things, like they can actually be a lot scarier. And I think when I think about animals, I think about what it would be like to, potentially at any point be eaten. I mean, this is a really scary situation. The fourth one, Buddhism is present in few places and not present in most places. That's pretty self-explanatory. Long-lived gods of the desire form and formless realms are so distracted by attachment to sensory pleasures and samadhi that they have no interest in dharma. And here they've lumped together the demigods and the god realms. Well, maybe not. Desire form and formless realms. Charles, you want to phone in on this one? Would the demigods be in those realms, or is that just the god realms? Oh, you're muted.
Demigods are in there, sure.
Okay,
Those
I kind of thought
demigods are the realms of desire.
so. Okay, good. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yep. And then and that's to me, I think we've talked about this before, but like there's a lot of people we see in this world that are kind of living in these realms, or at least analogously are. And there are plenty of people that we bump into even in daily life who are so distracted by sensory pleasures. And I think interestingly, like the other thing here is samadhi, like meditative states of meditation. But in this case, we're kind of talking about the meditation that unfortunately is so prevalent in secular meditation and mindfulness, which is, I think, comfort-oriented meditation that feels good. They're so addicted to it. It's not that, like I always say, it's not like meditation that makes you feel good is bad, but if you're getting addicted to that, then that's a problem. So so that's number 5. Number 6 is those who have extreme views and those who naturally dislike the Dharma have wrong views. And naturally dislike the Dharma, that could just be people who have a certain view of religion and then lump Buddhism in with religion, and I bumped into a lot of that. I don't know if you all have too, but yeah. There are desolate worlds where no Buddha has come and no one has heard of the 3 jewels. And we're not in that situation. We're free of that situation. And then number 8 is there are those without the faculties to turn their mind to the Dharma. And that's a tough one. I mean, there are some people who are born without the faculties to turn their mind to the Dharma, but there are also people who lose the faculties to turn their mind to the Dharma. And that was a question I remember that was asked of Rinpoche at one of the teachings too, about like, what if your mind starts to fail, at the end of life, and it's unfortunate. Like, I'm sure there's, the blessings of the lineage carry you a long way, but still, like, we kind of really need the faculties as much as we can for as long as we can. And so that's a big deal. So I see we're almost out of time this time. I want to continue this deep dive, but I would encourage you to use the document. Feel free to download it from the website and move through these contemplations with that 3-step contemplation plan. And recalling that, like, this really is what turns the karma, turns our karma from the karma of ignorance and selfishness towards the karma of wisdom and compassion. Any thoughts or questions?
Hi, Lama Adam. I wanted to share one thing. When a couple of years ago, being in the office, there, everybody gets talking, and you have your own little space, and I had my little prayer flags up, and I have, maybe the prayer before meals and a couple of things. And the sales guy comes in, and I know that he himself he goes to church, and he's pretty religious that way. And I remember him, some reason he looked over, and I had another picture of the Karmapa. I think I had a picture of the Karmapa and the Dalai Lama touching heads. And I always smile when I see that. And when I saw him look at it, he kind of looked down and just didn't look happy. And I asked him, I said, is there something about that picture you don't like? And he said, I don't like any religion where one person prostrates to another. That's ridiculous. And so he wrote off all of Buddhism, and he wouldn't even talk about it based on the fact that people prostrate. And I found that interesting. I didn't even know how to react, actually. I did. I felt sorry. I think I felt sorry for him in some ways, just sad that he would completely close off something all because of one thing. So I was curious your thoughts, how do you react?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me is like that, like, I think in that moment, the most powerful force was, I mean, my guess would be the most powerful force was his fixation on his self-identity, his fixation on self. I feel like one of the big red flags for me when I'm getting attached is when I say some version to myself of like, I'm the kind of person who blank. I'm the kind of person who doesn't like religions where people bow down to each other. Like in that moment, you have this idea about who you are and what is, and that's the only thing you're hanging on to. It's a concept, it's an idea or a memory, and you're not actually engaging with openness and curiosity with that moment and what you're learning in that moment. You're instead fixated on an idea about what you can and can't do, or what you do and don't like. And I think, a really interesting thing, from the dawn of Tantra, which I believe is the Trungpa book that he did it with Herbert Gunther. He mentions in there, or it could be the Lion's Roar, but he mentions that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have preferences. And that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, I'd never heard anybody else say that. He mentioned how, well, I know he said Bodhisattvas have preferences, but the idea is that, like, they know what they prefer and don't prefer, but they're not attached to that idea. And they never feel like if something is something they don't prefer, it's like an attack on them or something they can't be present with. They're not fixated on that, but they still know, and I think there's a lot of room for growth when we remember that, like, I may not prefer this, but what can I learn from it, and how can I kind of be reborn in this new situation? Am I going to be reborn as a hell being that feels like this is a big attack on me, or am I going to be reborn, as a enlightened being, like fresh in the moment, compassionate?
Yeah, that's a good, yeah. Right, thank you.
It comes up a lot, right? Like, there's, for all of us, we all have, and another reason I think that's a useful contemplation is because we all do it, and it then puts us on common ground. Like I do that too. I instead we have something better than them, we recognize like, oh, we're all carrying that same burden.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
But it is a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for just in
sharing.
that fellow's defense, he's from his perception is really that there was only one perfect person. All right, the Son of God. And so to him, he feels sorry for people that are paying homage to another imperfect being. That's the perspective that he's coming from. I think it makes it a little more understandable when we can understand it like that, and certainly not react with anger towards somebody like that, even though we might consider their view wrong view. Because he's just reacting from his training that perfection is not possible within the human realm. It's a wrong view, but it's sad and like Wendy did say, her first reaction was to feel sorry for the guy.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, it's like I agree with that, but it's like everybody has their own views about things, and like even the whole political thing.
Oh God, here we go.
Well, no, I don't get into politics at all, really, ever. But I had a situation today that was pretty gnarly with that, and I use my practice like no other.
Did you say today?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Wow.
But that's where the rubber hit the road for me, and I said, "Well, use your practice right now, right on the spot. Use it. What
Yes.
do you do? How are you going to be? What are you going to say? What are you going to do?" And I did, and I gotta share with you guys, it was intense.
Yay.
Nice. Yeah.
Let's hear it for Jody.
No,
That's awesome.
I don't want praise or anything, but like,
No, that's great.
like but I always think of like how we do all these intense practices. We think of the four thoughts. I do every day, contemplate. We do the Vajrasattva, which I do every day, or recite the Nundro. But when we really need to use it, when we really need it, sometimes we forget. But today I was like, don't you dare forget. Here it is.
That's great.
Slapping you in the face right now, remember it. And I deflected things, like I took it on. I did it. This is intense.
That's awesome.
That was intense.
And go ahead.
No, my dog's going crazy. I think somebody's here. Okay.
But yeah, I'm glad you said that because well, I was going to say this for next week, but this will be a good transition. I wanted to point out, like, I think that's so important because I know a lot of times our teachers will say at the time of death, only our Dharma practice matters.
That's right.
And I just want to make the point that I don't think that means only the time we've spent doing religious practices in this life will matter. I think that means like in every moment are we awake and aware, because we can do Vajrasattva and Razik all day, every day, and be distracted and thinking about dinner and be self-critical and all of those things. We can be just as distracted in a religious practice as we are in real life. But similarly, we can be just as engaged and fresh and present and compassionate in a Dharma practice as we can be in real life. And I think that's really the meaning, that we're talking about when we say like, at the time of death, only Dharma practice will matter. I think it's those moments, probably in a lot of ways, maybe even more important, because our Dharma practice, when we got it pretty easy. Like we get to control all the variables. And when we get out in the world, like that's the Dharma practice. That's tough. particularly challenging. And so,
And yeah, and also like seeing that the other person, when they're just so heated and intense, like how you can deflect that by just being like very middle way, like very listening, contemplating what they're saying, understanding, but not like attacking or attaching to things, even for my own opinions, like whatever they were, to let everything just kind of like fall by the wayside, and understand, wow, so that person, not making it about me at all. It's not about me, like understanding that person is really heated and really intense. And like, yeah, whatever.
yeah,
Did
that's
you,
I have
did
awesome.
that
to I
affect
have
the,
to unpack it a lot too myself.
It'll
I've
take a
been
while.
contemplating it. What, Lisa?
did that affect the other person? Did they like calm down
They
that when they
did. The
saw you?
whole situation was it got deflected. Like everything
Nice.
calmed down. It took a
Yeah.
while though. It took a while for that
Okay.
person to like just chill out. And even in that time was good too. Like all that
Yeah.
time that it took. Because again, like it wasn't like about me. Like I wasn't can add an eye to that. It's like not me. It was just in that situation. I don't know. I really am gonna like contemplate it, and somebody
You
just walked
probably
by.
helped them. You're like the example.
I hope I did, but I
I
don't
hope.
think that that's gonna make their opinion change, but maybe it
Right.
did something to make them understand that it doesn't have to be that intense or whatever, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be talking to my Dharma brothers and sisters about this on the side. I plan to, for sure. Anyway, I don't want to take, yeah, that's how I felt. That's what I felt. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. It's cool. But anyway, so well, I think we're after the hour, right? So should we dedicate the
Yeah.
merit, like Lama K says? Should we dedicate all this in the box right here? Dedicate it.
Sure, here I'll share a dedication prayer. So we'll say both of these two prayers. So this is the first one. By this merit, may all beings obtain the omniscience of Buddhahood and defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may we free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and also all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Let's take just a moment to rest the mind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lama.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
Lama
really
Adam.
so
See
glad to
you.
be doing this with you all.
Thank
So
you.
excited to see you next month.
We're
We're
happy to
glad that
have you.
you're here.
Thanks so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Check out our new website. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Absolutely.
Bye.
You will.
Got it. ktcsocal.org. Max did a really, really, really great job. Thank
Yeah.
you, Max.
Bye.
Okay. Later.
Nice
Bye.
job, everybody.
Bye. Stop it. Don't. You got.